No,
Fine
I've
to
received
you?
none, Mr. Mayor.
No, and none to me either. Any declarations of interest from any members who?
Mr. Mayor, I think it'd be best if you took me out number 8, because Stephanie's been working very closely with Nick on this. So if Alison could shut me away from that one, take me off the screen, I'd be grateful. I think it's wise on that one, really.
I don't think you have to be. Oh, yeah. Well, you would hear what's going on anyway, as long as you don't contribute, Jim. If that's the case, I don't see. Would that be okay, David?
I think Jim should leave the meeting during their item, Chair. I have discussed it with him and he's happy to do that.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough.
I'm much comfortable doing it, Stuart.
No, that's fine. I just thought, for clarity's sake, you know, that you could be watching and nobody would know in any case. So,
Thank you.
by virtue of it being a virtual meeting, sorry.
Well, on my phone, I'll turn my phone back on because I turn it off at meetings. Okay, thank you. I'll turn it back on.
Thanks, Morgan. That's very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, item number 3, minutes of the previous meeting of the Town Council, 8th of February, to be taken as read, and the Planning Committee meeting of the 9th of February 2021. I take it everybody has read them.
Yeah.
Nobody has an issue. So we take that as read. Thank you, Clark. And item number 4, the Clerk's Finance Report. David?
Thank you, Chair. No surprises here, I think. The usual format. 28th of February, of the Town Council's funds stood at £194,166, and both accounts have been reconciled to that date. During we paid out a total of 43,783, with 6,801 of that coming from Salisbury Gardens activities. And it included the second half yearly loan repayment to the Public Works Loan Board. The receipts in the month, the full list of payments in the month is attached as usual for members' information and comment. Paragraph 3, receipts total 16,952, with £15,050 coming in result of Salisbury Gardens activities. The list of payments and receipts against preset budget lines for the first now 11 months of the financial year is attached as usual, showing that payments in the period were £50,018 under budget, and receipts over the month were 5,845 under budget as well. Thank you, Chair. That's the report for this month.
Thank you very much, Clark. Members, any questions or observations?
No.
Could I have a proposer? Thank you.
I propose that, Chair.
Councillor Toogood, seconder. Councillor Milford, thank you very much. Nobody being against, I take that as carried. Thank you very much, Clark. Item number 5, Ventnor Park. The report is before you, 2021. Just to summarise, this is in respect of costs. You'll all be aware that we are now fully responsible for the clerk, and the clerk and the deputy clerk have had several inquiries about the hire of the park over the summer. While we are going to be talking about policy and strategy going forward, we really do need to establish a scale of charges for the park going forward, so that we can speak to the people who have got a firm interest in hiring the park over the summer period. So you will see before you in the report the proposed charges at paragraph 2, A, B, and C there, which I don't really have to reiterate. You can all read that for yourself and see what the proposals are, and the fact that we discussed the other day in the group meeting about reinstating the Ventnor Day, and we were all of the opinion, and Tony as an officer was very much supportive of the fact that we reinstate Ventnor Day in the park, and invite our friends at the BBC and other places to come and cover it. But that has not been included in the budget discussions heretofore, so we need approval for that to happen. Okay, that's in summary what this is about. So does anybody have anything they'd like to say, add, or question or dispute? Councillor Bond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. I don't see anything in the proposal about whether people can charge for entry to the park. But hopefully we will preclude having such events. You remember there was a fuss a couple of years back with an organisation that posted people on the gates and tried to charge people entry to the park. Are we not accepting such events?
No, I think it's a very good question, Councillor Bond, but I think the thinking there is that because it is a public park, it'd be very difficult, and there are so many entrances and exits to the park, it'd be very difficult to control members of the public on a day-to-day basis in any case, and charging them for it. This would be presumably for a particular part of the park, and the people who are responsible for the letting, whether they would charge, for example, if it was a marquee or whatever. But no, the council has no plans, as far as my discussions have gone forward with actually planning people to get into the park for anything. I talk about members of the public as opposed to commercial entities. Yeah.
I mean, the link I would draw, Chair, as a suggestion is that if it's an event where there is an entry fee, whether it's the whole park or whether it's a marquee or whatever, then there ought to be a payment by that organisation for renting the park. So I would see a link. So if you look at the 3-tier charging, I would see A, where it says no charge. That ought to be conditional upon it being an event that's freely open to the public.
Yeah, I take your point there. I think the thinking again, Councillor Bond, behind that was that those things being community inspired in any case, we made very clear to them that there would be no charge as far as we as managers of the park, that we wouldn't expect any community organisations to be making a charge on that basis.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting we add in, Chair, just to avoid us giving the park to somebody who ends up charging for entry.
Yeah, but I think that would be made very clear in the terms and conditions in the booking process. But the clerk and the assistant clerk can pop into that in a minute. Councillor Milford.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I too would oppose formal charging of entrance fees to go into events. It's one thing to ask for contributions, but I don't think if you actually charge for entry. Could I just clarify in point 2B what is actually meant by a formal organisation? I understand what community organisations are and commercial ones. I didn't quite understand what the term formal organisation was meant to cover. And just to say, I would support the setting of a budget of £3,000 to support a Ventnor Day.
Formal organisations in the guise of maybe charities or organisations of that like, Councillor Milford, would be my understanding of that. Anything else before? Would you like to add anything, Clark?
No, Chair.
Alison? I don't know if Alison's with us. She's muted in any case. Oh, she's there. Yeah, sorry, Alison.
And thanks, Stuart. The report is quite concise. I think it's everything that's already been suggested.
Okay, could you just be clear, Alison? I know that we haven't formally accepted the bookings, but the organisations that have asked to use the park, are they how would they best be described? As community organisations, commercial organisations, or whatever, without actually naming them as such?
Mixture, I would say, Stuart, there.
Yeah. Jim, Councillor Toogood. Sorry, your pencil.
No, sorry, my pencil. No, I've got nothing to say. I just go along with recommendations, but I can't see how we should or even think about putting an entrance fee on any gate at all, really.
Yeah, I don't think that's the
Idea.
I don't think that's the idea at all, or the plan, and after one would certainly be against it. But as I say, that would be filtered out in any case in the application process.
Thank you.
It's perfectly straightforward. I mean, Isle of Wight Council have been doing this for years in any case, not just at the park, but at the bandstand down on the seafront and various other places. And me as a hospitality professional previously understands completely how these things work, and it's really at the booking process that these things are filtered out. Anybody else? So the recommendation is, what about Ventnor Day? Does anybody have a view on that? It was very successful last time and covered by the BBC, if you remember. Sally Taylor and Jess Parker, who's gone on to greater things at Westminster these days, maybe as a result of a starring performance at Ventnor Day, whoever knows. But Dillian, sorry, Councillor Backhouse Fry.
I thought we actually agreed at that meeting, because I asked the question, are we happy to go ahead and have Ventnor Day on the 14th of August? And we all said yes.
We're happy, but it's up for the town council to decide formally, Dillian.
I know that, but I want them to know that we would all be delighted, and lots of other people would be delighted to do
I'm
that.
sure. Well, I would hope thousands of other people will be delighted and show their delight by attending.
And all the other towns on the island go, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah. Especially as it's been formally announced that there will be no carnival again this year. I think it's important that, that we keep our profile high. So, okay, thanks, Councillor Backhouse. The recommendation is that the Town Council agrees to schedule of charges as outlined. It authorises the Community Development Officer to organise Ventnor Day. Tony McCarthy, we're talking about here, who was instrumental in setting up a Ventnor, very successful Ventnor Day last time it took place in the park, and the budget for that day be set at £3,000. Could I have a proposal, please? Councillor Milford, seconder. Councillor Backhouse Fry. Anybody against that? That's unanimous, Park. Thank you very much indeed. And straight to item number 6, which is the management of Ventnor car parks. So this is, I think I'll let the clerk talk us through this. It's forensic knowledge, it would be true to say, of what's been going on over the past how many years over car parks. So Clark, if you could please.
Chair, I brought this to the Town Council because of the frustration, really, I think that members feel as well as staff feel about the Isle of Wight Council's apparent unwillingness to discuss the issue of the remaining 4 car parks with us. As you know, you've attempted in meetings that I've also attended with County Councillor Gary Peace to arrange a meeting with the relevant cabinet members, and that was suggested that would happen back in August, and more than 6 months later we are still awaiting. Chris Ashman, from an officer's point of view, is still not talking to me about it either, although at the meeting he attended with you and me he indicated that he would. And it's just frustrating, really. And so the only option I could see that might bring them to the table, which would be the object of the exercise, would be to go back to the community right to challenge, which is set out in the Localism Act of 2011. And as members who've been on the council since 2013 and 14 will recall, the town council then deployed that process of the community right to challenge in submitting an expression of interest in taking on all 8 car parks. I won't rehearse the history of that because it's anyway summarised in section 2 of the report, which you've all had and can go back to if you wish to. And I'm happy to provide any more detail if there's more needed. The end of the process was that the Isle of Wight Council refused the expression of interest on grounds number 10, as set out in the regulations attached to the Localism Act. The Town Council at the time and the clerks felt that those grounds weren't, the grounds on which they refused didn't apply to number 10 in the list, or indeed to any other of the 1 to 9 in the list. And therefore the Town Council agreed to take legal advice from experts in the field, Anthony Collins solicitors from Birmingham, and having considered the matter, they commissioned a barrister's opinion, which, as you can see, there's a link on the digital version of the paper if anyone wished to see it again. The barrister's advice was clear that the grounds of refusal would not stand up in court, but we were at the end of the 3-month period of applying for judicial review, and the barrister's advice was that if the Town Council lost, it could cost as much as £60,000. So at that point, the Town Council suggested that we look for a compromise. A solicitor's letter went to the Isle of Wight Council's managing director, Dave Burbridge, who instantly, well, almost instantly, arranged a meeting for us to attend with his senior officers, look for a compromise, and that's where we are at present. Settled for that because what had prompted the exercise primarily, certainly from my perspective, was the need to control Dudley Road car park alongside the proposed refurbishment of Salisbury Gardens. That's where we are in section 2 of the report. That's where we were then, back in 2014. The community right to challenge is still accessible. I've attached to the report the process from the Isle of Wight Council's website, although I've turned it into a coloured version because theirs is a bit touch drab and it's difficult enough to follow anyway. But it's a straightforward process. Expression of interest is required, and that's by and large already done because it will simply be an amendment to the one we submitted in 2014. That would pass, if you agreed to it, it would pass through those stages. And the interesting bit for me is that at the end of the process, assuming that, again, the Isle of Wight Council doesn't have any grounds to refuse it, and I don't believe anything's changed in that regard, the challenge would then be successful, which doesn't give the Town Council the car parks. The Localism Act 2011 requires that if there is a successful challenge by a town and parish council or by voluntary organisations for that matter, the service that has been challenged has to go out to tender. Now, I don't think that's in anybody's interest, neither ours nor the Isle of Wight Council's, because that would open a door through which commercial operators may choose to come. Unlikely that will be welcomed by people. So again, the solution would lie in constructive conversations about the business plan in December 2018, and to which we have yet to have a response. I think that's enough for me, Chair. Sorry for talking too much, but you did invite me to do so, so thank you.
No, thanks, Clark. I sure, and I expect the whole council. I've been on the council long enough now, and this seems to have been going on almost as long as the time I've been and part of the council. What struck me was that the barrister's opinion was quite emphatic at first, and it shows you the history going back as far as Dave Burbage. So it seemed, God, it probably isn't that long ago, but it just seems a long time ago now. Maybe that's just me, but I think, speaking for myself, I have a very strong feeling that we don't really have any other. If we're really interested in the car parks, which we are, we always have been, or we wouldn't have pushed it this far. But I think we'd be failing in our duty if we didn't take this course of action now and see what happens. It's striking again that talking about the rental spaces or the for the 3 spaces that might take up where the new public toilets are going to be, and the controversy over the fees for that, which according to Gary, Dave Stewart and others, they had to hold over until after the last cabinet meeting at which the car park strategy would be discussed, when in fact Ventnor Town Council was never even mentioned during the course of that meeting, either our proposals or in any other way. So it's, you know, it makes you wonder what the line of thinking is, or if indeed is there any lateral thinking going on there. But so I'm like you, I'll be quiet now, Clark, and just say that I support the proposal. Members,
I think we should go.
Just a minute, Jim. Sorry, Brian had his hand up. Councillor Lucas.
Yeah, the thing we must consider is that the car parks are a very serious revenue maker for the Isle of Wight Council, and I very much agree that we should put them on the spot in a legal frame. But when it comes down to how much they would want to lease these car parks to us at, we need to seriously consider whether we can improve that by making some small margin and giving benefits to the local people, because I see those car parks as rather full at the moment. Certainly the central car park is more full than I've seen it for many years. And we've got to consider when they come up with their lease figure, which, to be fair to them, should be realistic. We've got to be seriously considering whether we could benefit that by the way we would manage it. Otherwise, we would be locking ourselves into a loss. And that's different from Salisbury Dudley Road, because we know that that had a lot of spare capacity, and we've built that up and we've made some margin because of that. So yeah, put them on the spot, but we've got to be a bit careful about agreeing to what would be a lease figure which they would have to make realistically expensive in order to preserve their revenue.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lucas. Jim, sorry, Councillor Toogood.
No, that's fine. I totally agree with what Councillor Lucas has said. Whether we can get a figure out of them before we start, we don't really want to start running money at bills at the lawyers, do we? If it's a loss.
Yeah, but I think that the point, I don't think there'd be an outlay at the beginning, Councillor Toogood. I think the fact that we've been down this road before, the Clerk's perfectly well aware of what needs to be done as far as the public, as far as the right to bid is concerned. So we're quite experienced. Sorry, I'm not quite experienced, but the Clerk and the officers are very experienced at that process. Clerk, if you want to add to that.
Just to say, Chair, that the rent that we're paying at present for the car parks is the one that was set in 2014, and that was based on the average of the previous 3 years trading. And the Isle of Wight Council has put their charges up several times, and we could have made more money on the 4 we've got had we matched their price increases. But the Town Council has decided at each stage not to do that. So that's where that situation rests. As far as Councillor Toogood's point is concerned, they're not going to negotiate before they have to. So we will need to go first, but the legal work's been done, Councillor, because we've got the barrister's advice isn't going to change, and I don't see it. I think this is cost neutral in terms of putting it in front of the Isle of Wight Council.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Jim?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Pocket.
Hi, thank you, David. You broke up a little bit when you were talking towards the end, and if you would be so kind as to reiterate, because I'm interested in the risk that a commercial operation would be able to step in, and is there some way to circumvent that possibility of it going out to open tender, which would then invite that entity in? Because obviously, if a commercial entity was to step in, this would be an enormous banana skin that we invited, wouldn't it?
The response, Councillor Cockett, is the second of those two options. If the EOI was accepted, then under the process, under the law, it would have to go to tender. But my view is, I don't know whether that's one that's shared by members generally, is that the town council, as the Isle of Wight Council, is not going to allow that to happen. So therefore, it will need to come to the table for discussions. And that's the first step, really. What's frustrated me, and I'm sure members too, is just their unwillingness to talk sensibly to us directly about it. And this is one way to do that. And we can withdraw at any stage if it looks to be not in the best interest of the town.
Okay. But initially, it is a little bit like playing chicken with them. I sense with the threat of the commercial operator hanging over. But if you're confident we can withdraw early on in the process, that's good. On the subject of withdrawing, obviously, if we were to take control of all the car parks, it would be a sizable cost. There's no question about that. Would it be subject to a break clause?
Yes, the current one is already subject to a break clause. I think it's 12 months off the top of my head, but there certainly is a break clause, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And again, we've quite a bit of experience in this particular area. Councillor Milford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously I work for the council, so I know a little bit about the running of the car parks, and yes, they are quite an income earner for them, but I'm sure that the Isle of Wight Council would absolutely want to avoid getting to a commercial tender position, and would probably come to some sort of agreement with us, hopefully. Just conscious the last year has been a very strange one for car park income because of COVID and the waiving of charges, so we'd obviously have to look very carefully at the figures they proposed in terms of what a fair lease rent was vis-a-vis the likely income that would come in.
Thank you, Councillor Milford. Anybody else?
Me?
Councillor Backhouse-Fry, sorry.
Well, I mean,
If you were waving it, could you?
we all know where we are right now. We're only like 3 weeks away from Purda. I mean, there is a political element to all of this. I mean, we've been idiots not to know that. But I agree with David Bartlett. You know, he's got a great deal of experience. He knows basically at the end of the day, actually, we do in fact have the upper hand, but it's the way that we play it, isn't it? And of course, if all the sheep man up and vote blue again, it'll be difficult. But actually, maybe they won't. People will actually say, wait a minute, you know, we are the people, we'd rather have our car parks run and our towns run. Our town, actually, I haven't zipped around and looked at all the other towns. Our town is actually doing quite well. I mean, all the other towns are completely dead and empty and shut up. And Ventnor actually isn't all completely dead and shut up. And it is quite busy, isn't it, at the weekends? So I think we should have some faith in our people. I'm sure they have faith in us. So I think I would probably be guided by David Bartlett on this, because he knows what he's talking about. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Councillor Backhouse-Ryan. Anybody else before we move to the proposal? Well, I propose that we authorise the clerk to go forward in the manner outlined in the recommendation. I'm looking for a seconder, please. Councillor Lucas. Seconded by Councillor Lucas. I take it nobody's against.
Oops, sorry, Chair, seconded that.
Councillor Lucas, I proposed, Councillor Lucas second, and it's unanimous. Moving on to St Boniface Fields, we had the Assets and Services Group, which I chaired last week, had a very pleasant time listening to the report from the Secretary. Sorry, remind me, David George is the Secretary of Ventnor Shed, and Phil, one of the committee members, and the clerk has attached the report that we were presented with to this. This is not for any sort of decision, it's just to keep members informed of what's happening at St Boniface Fields. Things are moving along nicely now that we've come to agreement with St Catherine's School over the electricity. There was some fear that we might have to start digging the road outside up and at the cost of several £1,000s to put in an independent electricity supply, but that problem has gone away, and we no longer have to do that, and we are assured of a continuing supply of electricity to the fields, and there are just some other little bits and pieces going on there. So, as I say, the report's before you, and I'll leave it to you to comment if you feel that's appropriate, members. No? Okay, thank you. I just want to again reiterate what a terrific job I think Ventnor Shed are doing. I don't know how many of you've been and had a look. They're both there and at the allotments next door, but it's a real credit to them, and I really do hope that they get the appreciation from members of the public that they deserve over this. Thank you very much. And sorry?
I'll leave the meeting here. I'll leave the meeting on this next.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Too Good is now recusing himself from item number 8 on the agenda, and we will welcome you back, as Morgan says, afterwards. Jim, thank you. Esplanade. Sorry, did you say something? Esplanade traffic flow. You'll all know that there is a problem. Alison, you could just update us. We've had a notice from Ireland Roads that there's a one-way system either going to be or has been put into operation in the meantime down there. Did I get that right, Ali?
Sorry, say that again, Stuart.
Apropos this Esplanade traffic flow report, has the one-way system been put in place already? There seemed to be. We had a memo or an email from Ireland Roads the other day.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact date when that was happening. I think it was starting today. It was just their normal traffic orders that I email over to you guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just roadworks, isn't it, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's got nothing to do with this at all then. That was just
No,
trying to
it's
clarify
separate
it.
from this, Stuart. Yeah.
That's thank you for that. I just wanted
Okay, no problem.
I just wanted that to be clear.
No problem.
So as Steph Too Good, who obviously has a property down there, has been working with Nicky Cox and the clerk, and there has been some problems for anybody who has any eyes to see down there. Ever since we first, Ed Googe and I first moved to pedestrianisation of the seafront, and were left with our tails between our legs, among other things at the time. But we said then that it wouldn't go away, and true to form, hasn't gone away. So you'll see the Steph's proposals before you again, which I don't need to read out to you. So members, do you have anything to say on this? Councillor Bond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I must say I was surprised to see this on the agenda, not only because of the conflict of interest, which is obvious and probably is best discussed outside the meeting, but I'd say withdrawing at this late stage is not sufficient in my view, but also because, as I'm sure certainly the Green Party representatives on the council would have spotted, it's a motorist proposal. It's picking out one aspect of the esplanade relevant to motorists, making it easier to drive up and down the esplanade, probably making the traffic speed faster, when everything that we've discussed on this council, certainly since I joined it, has been about improving the esplanade for pedestrians and also for the businesses down there. And there isn't anything in this proposal for pedestrians. The issues about safety and access and disability are not mentioned. And I don't really understand why this particular proposal has more priority than the other improvements that we could identify on the esplanade, improving the access, making it safer and more pleasant for pedestrians, for example. And there's nothing really for the businesses down there either. And you'll know, Mr. Mayor, that several of the businesses actually approached a number of councillors before Christmas, asking us to look again at the issue of either pedestrianisation or at least providing more space for them to run tables and chairs outside their premises. This proposal would quite possibly involve loss of parking on the esplanade, and if you take away the loading bay instead, it would involve loss of loading and unloading spaces for businesses. There aren't any costs in the proposal. It doesn't take a genius to work out the Isle of Wight will come back with a bill if we send this to them and ask it to be done. And we haven't done any consultation of our own. The clerk tells me that the council had no involvement at all in the consultation that's referred to in the paper, which had a very low response rate. And I don't see how we could possibly recommend something to the Isle of Wight Council when we haven't done a consultation on it. But I think the biggest concern is that we made a commitment when we were looking at the town centre that as soon as the town centre was dealt with, we would have a comprehensive look at all the issues relating to the esplanade. And I had that in writing from the town clerk when I was just a resident. And I responded to the consultation and was told that the town centre was being looked at first and the esplanade would be looked at second. And when we look at the esplanade, we should look at everything to do with the esplanade: traffic flow, safety, pedestrian environment, more facilities for the businesses. And I don't see why, apart from the fact that one councillor lives down there, which I think is highly unfortunate in terms of this being on the agenda, I don't see why we would give this priority over any of the other things we might want to do down there.
I don't quite see the analogy with the fact that the councillor lives here. I live in Glenwood Terrace. Does that mean to say that if something was to happen here that I shouldn't live here? Or you said it was unfortunate. It's not unfortunate that you happen to live there. It's just a fact of life. But just to take before I open it up any further, Councillor Bond, you referred to pedestrianisation, you referred to consultation, you referred to traffic flow, and other things. We've been there and done all that in minute detail. I know you weren't a member of the council at the time, so perhaps you don't know about that, but the paperwork is certainly in the archive, and we had I would have called it a bitter arguments with businesses on the seafront over this. In fact, I remember one meeting which was full, led by the person who owns the Ale and Oyster and the other pubs down there. We really were taken through the mill over our plans to pedestrianise part of the esplanade as part of an ongoing safety, as we would have termed it, crusade. And I referred to Councillor Ed Gooch, who's no longer with us at the time. He and I were the instigators of this. We also had a town meeting at which needed over 100 people took part in up at the school at the time when we originally propounded these ideas. So I mean, I know you weren't around at the time, Councillor Bond, but we did do a big consultation exercise at the time. We did many public meetings at the times. We did 2 big public meetings chaired by myself and Councillor Macaulay in the town at the time over the whole pedestrianisation, not just the town centre, but also the seafront. So I just wanted to put that in context.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing,
So,
together, does it?
and also in relation to the 2 Hoods, being a married couple, obviously they have a place there. Jim is the councillor, so he's recused from the meeting. That's fine. But that, I mean, Steph Toogood has got every right to raise this and to bring forward what she would see as a solution to it as a resident down there, in my opinion. And I don't think that that should be denigrated in any way. So, Gillian, sorry.
Me? I'm outraged.
I thought you see your hand up there. Maybe you're just doing your hair.
No, you just said Dillian. I was just listening to you.
Oh, sorry, no, I thought your hand was up there. You were wanting to say something. That,
No, I wasn't. I was saying that. But anyway, if you want to call me, I'm totally outraged at what you just said. It was a disgraceful and disgusting performance by a load of bullies and ignorant people, and you know damn well it was. And I can't believe we all lay down and let them roll over. And I would never let anyone do that to me, as you know, because I was the only councillor that got up and told them to behave themselves. You all sat there like, oh, yeah, they might be right. But no, they weren't right. I agree. I absolutely agree with Councillor Bond. This is a completely stupid idea to have thousands of cars roaring up and down on the Esplanade. We do live in the 21st century. We cannot have pollution. We can't have what's going on down there. And we need more so. And I know an awful lot of people in Ventnor who weren't there that night because they probably couldn't get in the doors. But no. No, we do have to take this on. I'm sorry, guys. I just can't. I can't let that go. That was a stain on our council, allowing those people in and not throwing them out, which I would have.
Well, thanks for that, Councillor Barhouse. But your recollection is obviously a lot different at that meeting, and believe you me, I was not quiet. But I agree with you. It was a stain at the time, and what happened at the time. But other than that, our recollections don't match up, I'm afraid. Councillor Lucas.
Yeah, I would dearly love to have the whole Esplanade pedestrianised, and it would be very relaxing to everybody. Cafes would flourish, people would come there. I don't know how they get there because you'd have a car park at each end, so you'd have to think about how you get people there. It's a fact of life that people use cars. It's nice to think green, but it's a fact of life. Ask the people in the ferries how they get here. The proposal is to make a couple of 2 or 3 spaces available for a parking space, parking place. And I think that's a really simple first move. It doesn't have to be a part of a huge, great project, because that is the one part where cars get pinched and they get frustrated, and that's a danger to pedestrians where they get when they scream back because they've been held up, etc. This is quite a simple solution to a part of the problem, and I don't think just because we can't tackle the whole of the project that we should ignore this one. I don't like the idea of actually losing the parking, the loading bays, because that's very important for young families who have got lots of stuff for their kids to be dropped off at the beach. So you do need to keep those loading bays. But the spaces outside the Mill Bay, which is proposed as a parking place, passing place, I support, and I think that would be a big advantage to a pinch point of the traffic. And the major project, which is definitely university standard, is getting the whole of the pedestrianisation in the Esplanade. And you've got to get people like Mr. Gibbs and all the other people on side, otherwise it will be just a battle. And consultation will mean nothing because nobody will agree to it. There's too many commercial interests. So that's a major issue, but it shouldn't stop us making this small change.
Thank you, Councillor. I agree with you. As I say, we'd be revisiting something that is fairly recent history. Just the irony is, of course, that the loading bays are not there for members of the public. They're there for businesses to have deliveries at various stages. That was one of the things that was highlighted during the pedestrianisation consultation the first time. In fact, it was highlighted that one of the businesses down there abused that by using it as a parking space with the boot open, hoping that the traffic wardens would think that they were in and out of the car all day, taking things in and out. But I don't know if that happens anymore, but just as a matter of fact. Anybody else? Councillor Cockett.
I'm in agreement with the others who've spoken that it would be wonderful to have a full vision for the seafront, which incorporates everything from Besties and Spinksies all the way through along the Esplanade. But we know that getting that full vision done is a major project for the town council, and looking at what other parish councils do, they pull in consultants for that, and you're looking at tens of thousands of pounds and beautiful reports which are published and then maybe not acted on. So getting the full vision, it's a great idea, but that's not what we're talking about at this meeting, is it? What to get that, we need to commit a great deal of money. My reading of this is that it's a very simple, small step to stop people getting run over when they're going between the Met and the Mill Bay all day long. 7 days a week, there's cars going up on the pavement there, and I don't really see the controversy with this plan as it stands, and for that reason I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Corbett. With regard to other places and the consultation, Stephen, I know for a fact that Ryde are going to go ahead with the second stage of the pedestrianisation phase at the top of the high street, with virtually 100% support from local businesses, because it's been so successful in the past, and Cows are looking at extending their system as well, and that's even older than the Ryde system. It happened and has been successful, but for some reason, I don't have to educate you. We've been through this here before, especially with regards to the Esplanade, and it was an absolute nightmare. Led, I have to say, by the businesses that Councillor Bond spoke about earlier in the consultation. It was led by Neil Gibbs and et al. Down there, and it was going back to what Councillor Bat has tried, it was a very bad, poor face for us to go through at the time, and make no mistake about it, it would be the same when it gets arisen. But we're not talking about pedestrianisation. This is not what this is about. Councillor Milford.
Thank you, Chair. Now that I understand the proposal, it does seem a fairly minimal change, and I don't think I would oppose that. I think I'm just lend sort of support that. I'm just a bit concerned about the process and how we got here, that this has been produced at fairly short notice by someone who's kind of got an interest in it. And also there's been more consultation, as is very clear from the paper. So I wouldn't like this to set a precedent for how we sort of go at it. I would like to have considered wider aspects of the whole pedestrianisation and traffic management issue around the Esplanade. So I do suppose that the actual proposal is made, if it's just to get rid of a couple of parking spaces to provide a pass-by area, that makes sense. But I just think this is perhaps not the best way to go around making decisions at fairly short notice on the fairly sort of piecemeal.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Milford. Anybody else at this stage? Councillor Logan.
Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. Yes, and honestly, a lot of what's gone before, I thoroughly agree with it. Ultimately, the idea is, and ideal for me, would be to have the no traffic at all down in the Esplanade, with maybe the exceptions of people who need access to their homes. However, I think what we've got here is actually, yes, and it's a proposal I can quite agree with. But I think what we need to do is be very, very aware of how it's perceived. We know that there is some people that are actually sniping at the transparency at this council at this time, and let's not give them any more ammunition. This, I think, is a very simple proposition and one I can support, but I wouldn't like to just push it through the council at this point in time. I know it would be get some opposition if we put it out to consultation, but I think we really do need to. And then, I think with this kind of stuff, we would have to go up against the businesses to a certain degree, but this is such a simple, straightforward proposal with the correct consultation and agreement. I think we can actually find ourselves making the first steps in the right direction. But if we don't do it that way, it's just going to be seen as pedestrianisation through tiny steps and stealth. So yes, I would have proposed. I mean, apart from the fact I can't really see much difference between points B and point C, if I'm being perfectly honest, they both look exactly the same to me. I would be quite in favour of either of them, and but with due process, I think.
Okay, anything else?
Well, Chair, as I understand what Councillor Logan's saying, he's saying we should consult with interested businesses and residents along the Esplanade and then come back and make a decision in the light of the consultation. I think that's a fair summary of what he said. And if that is his proposal, I'm happy to second it.
Well, did you want to formalise that, David? Because my hearing was that it was a suggestion, it wasn't an actual amendment.
It was my proposal as a way forward, and yes, I'm quite happy to propose that as articulated by Councillor Bond. That we should consult on this proposal with interested parties and local businesses.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, but I just need a form of words for this to make it. Okay, if I form a proposal, we take the proposal as we've seen today and consult with local businesses and interested parties before making a formal decision. Does that make sense?
Businesses and residents.
Just before it comes to you, Brian. Thank you, Councillor Logan. But I just point out that this is a proposal to bring it to the Isle of Wight Council as a highway authority. Now, experience tells me, and it will tell you, that we better not hold our breaths over any response to an inquiry to Island Roads or the Isle of Wight Council as a highway authority to get a decision on this. And of course, even then, it would have to go back to the council. Councillor Lucas.
Can I just correct one point about consultation? I do know that Jim Toogood has arranged a leaflet to be dropped off to all the interested parties in that area and has had a favourable response, and that is why he's gone forward with the solution. I mean, he would not have done if he'd have got a negative response.
He shouldn't be involved in this at all.
And let me just correct you for the record, Councillor Lucas and Councillor Bond. The proposal is from Steph Toogood, not from Jim. Now, they may be a married couple, but they're each individual people, and let's not forget that in these days of equality. She's perfectly entitled to bring this forward as a resident of the Esplanade. So let's not conflate the issue here. This is not from Jim Toogood. This is from Steph Toogood.
Will you say that, Chair? The notes of the ASG meeting of October 2020 clearly show that Councillor Toogood was the one that proposed this in the first instance.
What we have in front of us is a proposal from Steph Toogood, not from Jim Toogood. That is a proposal. Clark.
I just wonder, Chair, whether members would be happy with at least putting the proposal to the Isle of Wight Council's Highway Authority before, well, at the same time as we do any consultation that's now seems to have been agreed. Because if we don't achieve this before the season starts, there's no point in doing it as far as I'm concerned. The whole proposal, as members need to be clear, was prompted by pictographs of lorries trying to pass each other in spaces where you can't do that, and on the pavement, not just occasionally, but almost constantly during the warm days when the Esplanade was crowded. So if we don't do anything with the Isle of Wight Council before, it won't happen in time for the season, if indeed it happens even so, as the chair says, we're not known for, understandably in these circumstances, for taking quick action. So I just wonder whether members might be happy if we tested out the Isle of Wight Council's feelings about it, and the consultation can go ahead and the council can then finally decide, knowing that either it's possible or it's not, because the Highways Authority obviously has the final word at its April meeting. But if we wait until the April meeting before we agree to ask them, we really might as well not bother.
Yeah, we seem to sometimes get bogged down in procedure here when we're talking about public safety, and I know procedure is correct, but it has its place. The traffic down there has already done its best to demolish one of the walls next to the mill bay with the lunatics, and I've witnessed this for myself with the speeding traffic down there next to one of the speed bumps. Now, I just would hate the fact that somebody would get hurt down there while we seem to be waiting around, and I just don't trust the Isle of Wight Council to make any timely decision on this. And at the end of the day, it will be them that make the decision and not Ventnor Town Council, because we are not the traffic authority, they are the traffic authority. And I think that seems to be getting lost somewhere here.
Can I just say something? 20 years ago, a 4-year-old child was killed outside the hotel, which is now the Metropole, big building. Yeah, okay. That was a terrible day. Awful, awful day. We can't take these risks. We absolutely can't. And if we don't, I absolutely agree with you, Mayor. We've got to do something about it. But somehow or other, we've got to find a pathway where we're the council. We are the council for Ventnor, aren't we? Yeah, and I know we have to, David, we've got to deal with the big council, but this is, we don't want any more horrible tragedies on the Esplanade. We really don't, And I don't know how we're going to do this, Brian, Lucas, but somehow or other, we must all have the will to do something about it. Of course we do. This is not just a passing thing. And I know Councillor Bond, because he's got far more experience than any of us, knowing the vagaries of traffic and people and councils. But I think we've all got to get together and be extremely what's the word? United. United is the word, a Biden word, of course. But we've got to be united on this, because we can't have any more small children killed in the Esplanade, not ever again. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, you expanded on my point, and I've rather lost the thread of the amendment. Come back to Councillor Logan. Are you wanting to push the consultation, David, or can we go to the Transport Authority and then bring it back to the council then?
I have no objection to them happening simultaneously.
Thank you. Okay. Could I have a proposer, please, for the recommendation? Councillor Logan, seconder, please.
Can you just clarify what we're deciding?
Yes.
The discussion seems to have got to the point where we're going to consult the residents and ask the Isle of Wight Council for a technical opinion at the same time. Is that rather than recommending a scheme, we're asking them for a technical view?
Well, there's no reason why we can't do that.
Yeah, no, is that the suggestion? Is that?
Yeah.
That's how I understand it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
A seconder, please.
I'll second.
Councillor Bond. Anybody against? Thank you. And the number, number 31 bus, sorry. The recommendations that Town Council has recommended to continue the service at the present level for 6 months to allow time for alternatives to be fully explored, and we have been talking about this again for quite some time. I don't intend to add anything more to it. I don't use the service myself, although I see it. Who would like to? Councillor Lucas.
I get very frustrated about the 31 bus because it's not sustainable in its present form. It doesn't really serve people in its present form. And I'm frustrated at the fact that we haven't come up with a set of possible alternatives to know whether we should chop it or carry it on and plan for the future. And it does not seem to be rocket science that we could actually identify alternatives, and we haven't. So we struggle on with the 31 bus, which is barely used, costs us an unacceptable amount of money. It doesn't really serve people very well, and we don't seem to have a plan B. And that's what annoys me. And we should put more effort into finding some possible alternatives and the funding of them, and see whether we can afford them or whether we should chop the 31 bus and forget about it.
Thanks, Councillor Lucas. Anybody else? Councillor Milford.
Well, thank you, Chair. I share the frustrations that Councillor Lucas has over this. We really would like to see it progressing. I'm very much in favour of public transport, subsidising it a bit if we need to. But we're just at an awful time at the moment. If you look around the buses that go around double deckers and running minor buses, it is really not a time where people are wanting to use public transport because of the COVID position. So we're just not, I think, in a position to make any real judgments about the future of the service at this point in time, because we're in a sort of very unrealistic. So I just feel we should keep our options open, support the thing in principle, but I don't think we can make any firm decisions at the moment because we just haven't got a realistic view of who wants to use buses.
Thank you, Councillor Milford. Anybody else? Councillor Cockett.
Yeah, well, as I guess the primary advocate for the bus over the last year or so, now I've got to say, I mean, I'm very disappointed with the situation. I'm obviously COVID, everything about it is an enormous disappointment, an enormous tragedy, and that has hugely affected the amounts of service. Looking forward with regards to COVID, things are either going to get much better very quickly, or they're going to get much worse, aren't they? There's no question about that. And that will, of course, be reflected on the usership of the bus as well. Anecdotally, I have had reports that a lot of people are not happy to use the bus. The driver who's not obliged to wear a mask doesn't, and that's putting a lot of people off anecdotally. Today, prior to this meeting, I received 2 emails. One was saying, you know, coming from a previous advocate, one was saying, look, that's it, chop it. It's just too much now because the usership is so low and the service is, you know, so poor. And I had rather an opposite email as well from another resident who was very excited to see that it was carrying on for another 6 months, in the hope that we turn the corner with COVID and things get much better and the usership goes up again. I agree completely with Brian. I'm also very frustrated that the work hasn't been done. It's quite a long time ago now that we resolved as a council to continue the service on the proviso that research was going to be done, and it hasn't been. So I'm really sitting on the fence about the number 31 myself. I would like to propose an amendment to the recommendation, and that is to say that the service continues at its present level for 4 months, just to put that extra, because within 4 months we really should have had that work done, and as well in 4 months we really should know what's happening with COVID. It's going to get much better or much worse, and I don't see that hanging on for 6 months should this situation continue. I don't see that's a good use of public money at all.
Just before I put that amendment, Stephen, sorry, Councillor Cocker, I just wanted to say something about the research for a new service, which I instigated as members. Well, some might not, but most of you will remember I did ask officers to look into the possibility of a new service in some form either by doing everything on our own as a council rather than having it farmed out to a third party. I think, as you've just said, the way we do things at the moment are completely unsatisfactory for a number of reasons, not least of which it's not disability friendly. In fact, it's probably breaking more laws than it's upholding that service at the moment. And we've already been through, going back to the last Ventnor day, when we were threatened with being taken to court over disability access. So I'm surprised that, you know, that hasn't happened heretofore. But just to say to you that that there is work going on, although it might not be as fast as we would like it. It is happening. So before I bring the clerk in, who's his hand up, I take it you mean to strike out the 6 month and replace it with 4 month period?
Well, to my mind, I mean, obviously, the clerk will have an input into that as well, and obviously, I respect everything, all the input that comes from David. But that is a suggestion from me at this time. Yes, to strike out the 6 months and to replace it with 4, just to put that, just to get the thing moving that little bit extra, because we have kicked this can down the road. We all acknowledge that.
Okay, well, I need a seconder for that, Stephen. Stephen, sorry, Councillor Corrigan has proposed an amendment striking the 6 months and replacing it with 4 months. I need a seconder for that before I go to David. Seconder?
Seconded.
Councillor Lucas. Clark.
Sorry, just from me, I just, for the sake of the record, really, as the chair has indicated, there has been research done. It's not as if it's been ignored, and we have enormous detail on the cost of new buses, on the cost of electric buses, and both the capital costs, bought new, bought second-hand, and the estimated running costs. There's been a lot of research done, and the feeling has been so far that we haven't got a proposal that we feel we could bring to you. But it's not because we haven't know what's been done. It's the results aren't as we would wish them to be. There's an allied issue, of course, which is that of the route any new service would take, because the discussions members have had before have always indicated that you're looking for an extension of the route, and that again is a significant amount of work involving, amongst others, Southern Vectis, because they won't let us run buses that duplicate their services. I'm not saying any of this is impossible, but the most promising result of the work that's been done so far is the discussions with the West White, Joe Kennis in particular, whom most of you know from other areas of activity, linked to the Fit Bus service, which has proved sustainable and effective in that area. And discussions have been started, though not yet progressed far enough to bring a proposal, because there's been no agreement on what might be possible, as to the possibility of integrating what this council is looking for with an already existing community bus service. I just don't want you to think that we're ignoring it, because we're not, but it's not a simple option. And that's why I went on paper with the recommendation to continue the service, in the hope that a bit of an extension might give time for actual consequences to come from that. Whether it's 4 months or 6 months, I certainly don't have a view about that. I do feel, though, that until COVID does relent even further than it has, it's not a good time to be seen to be withdrawing something. So that's me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I agree with most of the members who have spoken already. I mean, the one challenge I think I'd make is, with hindsight, we probably would have been better to have stopped the service at the beginning of lockdown. We'd certainly have saved a lot of money, and we wouldn't have inconvenienced very many people. And the problem we have now is the budget. These numbers are sort of way short of even the budget we provided. So we need to put in extra money on top of the money we budgeted. And with 3B jumped out at me. That 3B essentially says that we've looked at lots of options, and we haven't, which is basically what the clerks just said. We haven't found any alternative that is feasible. And I think when I raised this during the budget discussions for this year, the answer that the meeting was given was that we were holding on to the 31 simply because we were looking at running some sort of alternative, and that's looking less and less likely to me, reading both this report and what the clerk has said. And I mean, May is when, I certainly agree with Councillor Crockett's amendment, May is when life is supposed to return to normal, and we should know within a couple of months whether or not the service is viable. My strong suspicion is it won't prove viable. We're just delaying the inevitable. We'd have been a bit better probably to have been bolder at the beginning and wound it up a year ago.
Thanks, Councillor Bond. Yeah, I agree largely with everything you said there. Okay, we have the amended proposal from Councillor Cockett, seconded by Councillor Lucas. Anybody have, I think, just a show of hands on this really for the amendment, which will replace the 6 months by 4 months in essence. All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you, Clark. Is that clear for you, David? Thank you. I'll take it that it is. Item number 10 is the amendment to standing orders for decision, and I'll ask, if you don't mind, Councillor Bond to lead on this, as he's done an awful lot of work on it over the past few weeks. Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, this sort of was a job that started off as a small job and grew as the clerk and I were working on it, because we started off looking at some of the contradictions that emerged from the wording we had in standing orders that we derived from the NOUC model draft, because the National Association of Local Councils produces a draft for parish councils. But they've done it in a most peculiar way, I have to say, with coloured dots to indicate which paragraphs apply to which parts of the council. And if you don't have the coloured dots, the whole thing doesn't make sense. So the more we dug into it, the more changes between the clerk and myself we were looking at. And in the end, I suggested it might be worth looking at a rewrite. And I did a draft for the clerk just to see what he thought of it. The objects of the rewrite are set out in paragraph 1D in the report, emphasising that we haven't set out to change anything. There's a few tweaks where we've actually matched up with what we do already, but we didn't set out to rewrite the rules to change anything, but rather to try and have a plainer English, easier to understand, more sensibly laid out document. And I think, as it says in the report, we've saved about 1,000 words out of, I think we've gone from something like 6.5 down to about 5,500. So it's less to read, but it's still not bedtime reading, Chair.
Thanks, Ian, and thank you very much for the work you put in. As you say, I mean, it's for something that started off maybe seemingly simplicity itself. Obviously, when you take in, I mean, 6,500 words is a lot of words to go through and try and filter. So for that, I thank you on behalf of my colleagues very much indeed. Members. Oh, sorry, David, did you want to add anything?
No, apart from thanking Councillor Bond, because this wouldn't have happened without his expertise and determination to get it right. There were 6 versions came my way during the process, and I've contributed very little apart from saying yes.
Well, I do hope, both of you, that not a lot of trees were felled in the making of this exercise. So I thought it was all electronic rather than paper drafts.
Yep.
I'm pleased to hear it. Colleagues, anybody on this? Councillor Toogood.
Yeah, I just think it's a credit to Councillor Bond and Dave Bartlett. The end result looks really good, very neat, tidy. You know, for me, it's easy to read, so it's got to be good news. Really. Yeah, I think, yeah, a lot of hard work on this, and it's simplified it somewhat. So I think it's a fantastic document. Welcome to both of them.
Thank you, Councillor Toogood.
It's tempting to send it to Nalca and suggest that they replace theirs with ours, because theirs is a
Yeah, it
complete
could become
mess.
the model. It could be. Well done. Yeah, could do that.
Thank you.
Can we have a formal resolution?
So I take it then you'll have no trouble, Councillor Bond, in proposing the change.
I'm not happy to do that if you wish, Chair.
Could I have a seconder, please?
I'd like to second that, Chair.
Councillor Good, and I take it nobody's against that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Good work.
And on to item number 11, the Assets and Services Working Group.
Ooh.
Good run there. To which is attached a draft remit, which is I'm not going to read it because you all will have read it in any case. Colleagues, who would like to? Councillor Bond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, the revised draft is a lot better than the earlier one we had, and I'm grateful for that. Members will know that I've expressed concerns on a number of occasions about things that seem to emerge from this group, sort of finished ideas that haven't been discussed on the council before. And I know that at least four of the other members listening in have raised or shared such concerns with me during my first year on the council. Whether you still hold those views or not, I don't know. But I know certainly the year when I joined, a lot of members were unhappy with the way things seem to appear from the ASG without having been considered at the council. And really, the suggestion I would make relates to the third part of the terms of reference. Having a think tank is fine, but a think tank is a group that works for the council. So the council wants something looked into, for example, alternative to the 31 bus service. The council should ask the working group to go away and look at the options for the 31 bus service, or go away and look at the options for the traffic flow on the Esplanade or whatever it is. And the working group should report back, and that's the way I would expect it to work. The way it is working is that things just appear by magic on the council agenda that those of us that don't serve on the ASG have never discussed or even agreed to in principle. And the one change I would suggest to the terms of reference, it says in the third section, it says the group would also provide the town council with a think tank function of exploring, and at that point I would insert at the request of the council. But the job of the think tank is to explore the things the council asks it to think about, not to go away and come up with completely new ideas on its own.
Thank you, everyone. Anybody else? Councillor Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, in principle, I agree with Councillor Bond there, but the Assets and Services Working Group involved themselves in a series of practical issues, and a lot of things come as obvious developments from the practical things that they're doing. I would hate for the town council to have to instigate everything they looked at, because they aren't in the same conversation. Therefore, they wouldn't be aware of the things which would be useful to be think tanked about. So I resist really the idea that we can't come up with new ideas. And I don't like the idea that we plant them in front of you as a magic contribution. I think you ought to know in advance what we're thinking about, and I think that the clerk's reports indicate the sort of things we're talking about, and that's the time where I think the town council should say, we don't want you to go down that road, or alternatively, please keep developing it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Tudor.
Yeah, I think some of Councillor Bond's ideas are good, but I also agree with what Councillor Lucas said. It's a very difficult one. We're treading a very fine line here. Maybe we could do a bit more discussion on it. I don't know, but it's a very difficult one, this is.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, I've listened, with interest to the comments so far. And without question, you know, Councillor Bond does have a point with regards to new ideas which spring up. I mean, it would be good for the council as a whole to have a space for those ideas. That includes the entire council. Of course, all of us are welcome to start sending emails to each other. You know, we're quite at liberty to do that. But outside of that, where does that space exist? Because we're not going to have any other business at the end of this where we start brainstorming, are we?
Not as long as I'm chair.
Perhaps we should.
So yeah. So I mean that's perhaps something really after May that I believe, you know, we should consider as a council is creating that alternative space that it really exists, not for the nuts and bolts. Because I having been to 50% of the assets and services meetings in the last couple of years, or 30 or 40%, I know that most of what's discussed is incredibly dull and won't look good on YouTube, you know, talking about letterboxes and steps and washers and sinks. But for the more interesting things, then certainly I think, you know, we need to find a way that the entire council is involved.
Yeah.
You Councillor Clerk.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else before I summarise? Well, I don't think it'll come as any surprise to anybody to know that I have a fundamental disagreement with Councillor Bond over this, especially the premise that the ASWG make decisions in advance of the council and then present it as a fait accompli to the town council. The town council consists of 11 people with an equal vote, and they have a chance to say yea or nay when the proposals are put to them. So that, as far as I can see, answers itself. And you know, I don't intend really.
Not my experience, Chair, and I suspect it looks different if you're on the ASG. I mean, at the last meeting when we were discussing Colm's concerns around the procurement on the toilets, in that middle of that meeting, at one point, you cut the discussion short and said, "We've discussed this ad infinitum." Those are your exact words. We've discussed this ad infinitum. Now, as a member of the council who isn't on the ASG, I'd actually never discussed that before, and I'd never heard it discussed before. And the problem is that if you're on the ASG, you feel you've discussed things at great depth. If you're not on the ASG, quite often things come out of the blue. And you will know, Chair, that the issue that excited me, if you like, on this issue, because prior to that point I'd been reasonably calm about it, was when a member of the public told me in the park about the Ventnor Flags project, and this member of the public knew more about it than I did, because I knew nothing about it. I didn't even know the project existed, and then this member of the public told me it had been discussed and agreed by the council, and lo and behold, the following day the budget papers dropped through my letterbox, and there it was in the budget. And as a member of a parish council, where legally every member should be involved in decision making, we're not allowed by law for any individual councillor or any subgroup of councillors to make decisions. I thought that was appalling, that I should find out about something my council was doing in the park, and also look an idiot because this member of the public was asking me about it and I had no knowledge at all. And since that day, I have tried to get to the point where we do what other members have just discussed. Councillor Dealey Fry, Councillor Crockett, Councillor Lucas, they've all said that all of the council should be involved in what ideas we're working on. And that's all I'm trying to do. And if you don't do it in the way I'm suggesting, then I throw it back to you. How are we going to make sure that before finished proposals emerge from this working group, everyone has a chance to know what's going on?
Well, I think that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. There's no finished proposal. The working group, I don't know if the concept of the working group is that we reach a consensus amongst ourselves, the people who are on the group, for consideration in brackets or not by the full council, and that's how we've always worked, certainly ever since I've been on it, and I've been on it for quite some time now, and it's never ever been and you say you've had members come up to you, but certainly as chair, they've never come through me to highlight any concerns that they might have. I don't know why that would be, because I would have thought that would be the natural thing to do, but it's never happened. So we're going to have to agree to disagree in this, Councillor Bond. It's just that I don't see the problem as being the problem that others would see it as. But we're not going to agree now, obviously, and I'm quite happy for that to sit there.
Right, can I say something? I actually, on the subject of the public toilets, I couldn't possibly vote for or against it because I didn't know enough about it, because you weren't prepared to debate it in that meeting. I thought that was pretty outrageous, but it wasn't the very first time. I felt very uneasy in the last year or so, although of course I've not been here a great deal. However, there have been things that have arrived and departed, and I've thought, do you know, I don't actually know anything about this. This has sort of come out of, left field. I don't know, and I'm not going to vote for anything that I actually don't know about, and I'm pretty sure most of you wouldn't either, really. Now, and I agree with Ian Bond. This has been a problem all along, and you all know this is true. And this is why in a council like Ventnor, we cannot do this. We cannot do it. We've got to be totally transparent. And if we don't do that, then we will have another outbreak of people putting silly notices in windows and, oh, come on, that whole last fandango. And I was pretty upset that you just closed that off at that meeting, because I was looking forward to finding out really a little bit more, but no. So I had to withdraw voting either for or against because I didn't know enough.
Well, again, you're entitled to your opinion, Councillor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Again, at the risk of repeating myself, how many times this was brought before in forms of report to the full council and voted on, going right back into 2019. So the idea that this has not been discussed or was discussed in a closed room is utter nonsense as far as I'm concerned. And again, people are not trampling to my doorstep to complain about the way that the council has done this. I think they would complain if the toilets weren't going to go up at the end of the day because they'd be left with nowhere to go. But that's just the way it is. We cannot. These meetings have a structure. We have 2 hours at these meetings, and if we were to allow one subject to dominate the meeting, then we would get nowhere. So we have to have some sort of structure, and that's why we have members are only limited. And I'm very, in my own defence, very good at it, but members are limited to 2 minutes understanding orders to say their piece on particular subjects. And we never, ever invoke a time limit of members. Never. We've never done that under my chairmanship. We didn't do it under Jason's chairmanship either, to my recollection. So I think we've been entirely fair about letting members have their views known on that.
Well, that's not what we're talking about. The meeting before that, you actually cut me off again. When I objected to another member of the council making a remark, which I'm sure he didn't really mean seriously, and I said, no, you can't say that in a public meeting. You actually said, oh, well, don't worry about that. I'll just, we'll wipe it off. No, you won't. You can't do these things. This is a public meeting. Our people in the town want to know what's going on, don't they? Of course they do. And we have to do it.
I don't recollect that, I'm afraid.
Well,
I said, don't worry about it. We'll write it off. That's certainly not the way I characterise the way I do things. Clark.
No, sorry, we've all seen it. It's all seen it. But look, we can't go on like that. We've got to be open and transparent. And David knows this. And you can't shut people up just like that.
Chair,
Go away now.
Chair, just to say that I've heard what Councillor Bond is saying, and on the question, as he's indicated, the only issue is around the think tank function. Now, that won't stop happening because, as Councillor Lucas says, in the course of discussing ideas that we are within the council's remit to do, other things crop up. But I hear that where they do, we need to make sure that the town council is aware of ongoing discussions. So I will look to provide fuller notes of the ASG meetings, and given yesterday's experience, we'll circulate them earlier to ensure that members are aware. And as Councillor Crockett says, email traffic between councillors could do with more encouraging, really, as long as we're all included in it. In previous councils, as Alison will confirm, traffic has been quite busy. Here, I send out stuff and there's a deafening silence in return. People don't respond, don't comment, don't suggest, with the exception of Councillor Bond, who does. So if it's any reassurance to members, I hear what's being said, and whatever the final resolution comes to, I'll put that into practice in any event.
I mean that's helpful, David, and one additional suggestion might be to look at sharing the agendas as well, because the important thing is members have a chance to be involved beforehand rather than afterwards. The only other point in it, Councillor Dealey-Fry touched upon it, another effect of the way things are done in Ventnor is that the public are excluded. The public only get to see something at the end, and quite often it's nodded through without any discussion because the majority of members have already discussed it behind closed doors, and I don't think that's healthy either. The parish councils are supposed to work in that things are discussed and developed and knocked about in the open, so the public have the chance to attend or at least listen in afterwards to find out what we've discussed. That doesn't happen in Ventnor. I mean, the Ventnor Flags project is a classic example. There was no information whatsoever was available to any member of the public who might be interested before that went into the budget. And in fact, because it's disappeared again, we've gone through the whole process of putting it in the budget, raising the council tax, taking it out of the budget, dropping the council tax back down again, and no member of the public has had a single piece of information about what that project was involved. And that can't be right. That's not how parish councils are supposed to be run.
I think when it comes to town councils and planning committees, for example, the town council is a committee of the whole council, if you like, then the public are admitted, although there is nobody here tonight. And I think it's common practice that working groups have never, as far as I can see, let members of the public in purely because they're advisory groups. But I mean, I'm quite happy, speaking for myself, to let members of the public have access to the groups. It's never been a problem that I've ever had.
That's the wrong way. It's the wrong way of looking at it, though, Chair. The problem is what's being done at the groups, not whether they're open to the public.
No, but you're saying that if members of the public were there, they would be aware of what was happening. What is it to be?
Well, the logic is that the working group is looking at the detail of something that the council in principle has already agreed to look at. And if we were doing it that way, there'd be no problem because the public would already know if they wanted to be involved that we were looking at, for example, alternatives to the 31 bus or traffic flow on the Esplanade or Ventnor Flags or the pedestrianisation scheme or whatever it was. The way things work in Ventnor is all these things are discussed behind the scenes and they emerged effectively finished.
So what you're saying is, in its simplistic form, is you just want the agenda to be published in advance publicly.
Well, that would be a useful step to now. It doesn't unfortunately deal with the issue of public involvement.
I don't know what you mean by the public involvement. You mean you're encouraging the public to bring forward ideas?
Well, that would be good as well. And one of the if I'd rewritten the standing orders to suggest how I think the council should be run rather than how it is run, I would have made the public forum a more open session where people could come forward with any ideas they like, whereas under our standing orders, they are in theory, it's restricted to what's on the agenda of the meeting.
Yeah, but I don't think we've ever had a problem with members of the public, and certainly in my time at the council, I can think of when members of the public can come and talk about things which are not on the agenda. I don't think that would be a problem at all.
Oh, God.
I don't think he's helping us. Anybody else? Councillor Toogood.
Yeah, Chair, I think in every committee there's room for improvement. And I sit on the committees, with yourself, and I enjoy it. It's a good committee, but I think we should listen to what Councillor Bond has come up with. I'm not going to say all what he said is correct, but the clerks agreed to make some amendments. So let's talk about it before we, say no to it. Let's see where we can make some improvements. I think time goes on, things change, don't they? And I think we've got to move with it and make a few changes. And I think what Councillor Bond come up with, I don't agree with all of it, but some of it's correct. And without repeating myself, I'm good at wherever clerk has agreed to make some amendments, let's look at it and then rediscuss it. Take another shot at it.
But it's for us as a council to agree the amendment, not for the clerk to agree. Anybody else? Okay. That's good for me.
Yeah, just quickly, Chair.
Sorry, who was that?
It's me, Stephen. Just for the sake of the discussion, whilst this is open, what about the role of task and finish groups? How can they supplement the work of the ASG, and would that be suitable for councillors to step into certain projects at their very initial stage? Councillors that have interest in subjects, because please do correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, a task and finish group is a commonly used form of vehicle to progress projects. Yes.
Yep. Yes.
We don't allow for task and finish groups under our standing orders, or do we?
Okay. Yeah, I'm gathering that from silence from.
Well, no, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, Steve. All I'm saying is that I don't think it is, and it would fall foul of Councillor Bond's proposal in any case, because the task and finish group, by its very name, is a task and finish group. It wouldn't be allowed to finish anything. It's for the town council to reach.
I'm not sure I understand that, Chair. I mean, the group would be formed by the council. It would be formed by the council under the standing orders that enable us to create working groups. It would be a temporary working group in effect. And the key difference is that the council will be deciding to do it at the beginning. And therefore, it would be on the public agenda at the beginning that the group have been formed to look at, traffic improvement and pedestrianisation improvements on the Esplanade, or art projects to promote Ventnor or whatever it is. And that's the difference. It would be actually initiated by the council, and that's essentially what I was trying to achieve with my suggested wording. Because it needs a short discussion. I mean, if we had the Ventnor Flags project, I'm still clueless as to what the point was. To me, it seemed a non-starter the minute I saw it, because of issues of ownership and damage and insurance and so on. But that's all by the by. The point was that I don't know where that came from. It should have come from the council. We should have sat round the table. Somebody should have suggested, well, wouldn't it be a good idea if we came up with a project that involved artists in promoting the town? And then a group, the ASG or some other group, should have gone away and looked at options and come back with a proposal. That's how I would expect the parish council to work. Not that it just drops into the budget, and as a member of the council, I had no involvement whatsoever until it was already in the figures.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Well, I'll get back to the point, with all due respect to Councillor Cocker, that we're not discussing a task and finish group here. We're discussing the remit of the Assets and Services Working Group. Or maybe I've lost something along the way. So let's get to the recommendation, which is that we adopt the amendments as stated. And they are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Could I have a proposal, please? No?
Sorry, Chair, we're puzzled because we've had a good discussion. A lot of members have knocked around ideas, and the clerk appears to be up for looking at some changes to the way things are being done. And I'm not hearing where we're building that into the recommendation.
Well, we need an amendment to that case. David, help me here, please.
Well, Ian could.
I'm faced this here with what I have in front of me, and I haven't had an amendment to that. It's certainly not officially.
The original suggestion from Councillor Bond was to insert some words in which paragraph, Ian, was it?
Well, my original suggestion, and this may not meet the consensus we're sort of moving towards, but my original suggestion was in 4.3. You've got that first line, so the group will also provide the town council with the think tank function of exploring. And then I would just insert after exploring at the request of the council, and then carry on as it's written.
Would you be happy to propose that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to propose that, but there is an alternative way of coming at this that maybe is more likely to find favour with the council, but I'm happy to put that forward.
Yeah, and I'll second it.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
Right.
Well,
Are you happy with that, Ian, then?
if you're happy to have that change included, which essentially establishes the principle that the council initiates new ideas and then the think tank does the work, then I'm happy.
And you're seconding it, David?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anybody against that? Thank you, David.
You, Chair? Good.
Well done.
And to just don't go anywhere, David. We need to report now.
Yes, Chair. I could be very brief with this because standing orders say you can't meet beyond 2 hours, I believe. So,
You've got 20 minutes.
Sorry?
You've got 20 minutes, David.
Support for vulnerable residents, that continues, still at a lower scale than previously. And we're waiting to see how that develops, of course. Opening up, and we're proposing to open the paddling pool and the outdoor gym on the 29th of March with the signage that was used before restored to both venues. That fits with government guidance, as most of you will be aware. Office management remains as was before, and we propose to continue on that basis, and that also fits with government guidance at the present time. Dudley Road car park, the area of it, as you'll be aware, has been taken over by the Isle of Wight Council's contractors for a large area of it at the charge of £500 a week. It was originally booked for 3 weeks, and Alison had a request which we've agreed to extend it for a further 3 weeks. It doesn't seem to be causing any problem for residents. Alison has arranged with the Isle of Wight Council's parking team to allow the permits for Dudley Road to be valid in Market Street for the duration of the occupancy. Another very good meeting would be South Wight Parish's Health and Wellbeing Forum, reported here, and the dates of the working groups. That's it, Chair. I'm done.
Thank you. Anything for the clerk?
Just a question on item 4, if I may, just arising from that. On the restoration of Belgrave Road, I think the publicity when last year was that it was scheduled for the summer. I think July rings a bell, but speaking to the contractors down there, they seem to be under the impression that they're now looking at an October finish. Do we know if that's official?
The chair will have some information about how we're in contact about that.
Sure. I'm meeting with Ian Ward, who's a cabinet member responsible for that, tomorrow morning, precisely to ask him that question, Ian, because like you, they seem to be very vague about what's happening, and we've had several complaints about that. So I did that, and to his credit, Ian Ward was very quick in agreeing to the meeting. So and Stephen is going to be there, as Stephen Cockett, Deputy Mayor, is going to be at it as well. So all these questions, hopefully, won't they, Stephen, will be answered at that meeting, and we'll be talking about the High Street and as well as Belgrave Road and the various other bits. We had the bit down Kings Bay, which caused grief the other day here when the drains had to be suddenly dug up and nobody knew anything about it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I get the impression they're behind across the board, which isn't surprising. But I mean, the workmen and women down there are talking about October, which is probably not the ideal time for doing work like that, given how stormy it can be in October here.
Well, it doesn't surprise me because they're not famous for it, and it has been going on for a long, long time now. Belgrave. In fact, I'm surprised there's not been more input from the residents up there. They seem to be quite quiet about it. Councillor Milford.
Could I just ask, Chair, is the plan then to fully restore Belgrave Road in terms of vehicle access?
I think that's the Island Roads plan. Yeah, but hopefully I'll find out at this meeting, Stephen. Of course, I'll report back as soon as Stephen and I have met them. But yes, I think the answer to your question is I think that's what their intention is. But what's the space? I don't know if the residents know that. I don't know. You're a resident of Belgrave Road, Jim. Have you?
Yes, they told. Yes, they have, Chair. They told us that we like it as it is. Actually, it's nice and quiet. But they told us it's going to go back as a main road again.
Yeah. Well, you've already got the road above it, which does the same thing. It's just mirrored, isn't it? Anyway, there we go. Just to go, before we finish, I'm not trying to be obtuse when I say this, but when we talk about amendments and things, and it's something that the clerk has referred to and I've referred to in the past, members get the paperwork now even delivered to them, but even when we're getting it in electronic form, if you read the papers and the reports, and if you do have amendments to any proposals on the agenda, it would be helpful to have them in advance of the meeting to avoid things like we've had tonight. I mean, not that anybody's disagreeing with them, it'd just be nice to be clear about it before the meeting, and then we don't have to go around the houses arguing the toss over wording, etc., etc. I'm just saying that by way of an observation and advice. But thank you very much indeed. And Ian, I'll get back to you. I'll ask Stephen, and I'll do maybe I'll ask Stephen to do it because he's been foremost in propounding this. Pursuant to a meeting with Ian Ward, the cabinet member, give his report to David, and David can circulate it to members.
Yeah, it may depend on what they find with this core they've taken, and they've only just taken it. And I don't know I've no idea how long it takes to analyse stuff like that. They may just say they're waiting for the results of the analysis. But. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't know what they said, so I just have to take it at face value, Stephen.
Yeah, just to be clear, I mean, from my point of view, there's two topics of conversation. One is the High Street, because we haven't seen any action from the proposal that we forwarded, but good agreement on. But there has been press releases from Island Roads and Isle of Wight Council saying great upgrades they're making to footways around the island, but nothing for ours yet. And the other item is, as discussed, Belgrave Road, because we did discuss it at this council. I guess it's 3-4 months ago, and we requested that they considered opening it up for active travel only, and that doesn't seem to have been discussed. So that they are the two items. And Stuart, it's Wednesday morning, no?
Wednesday, 10 o'clock. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is he responsible for the coastal path, out of interest?
Well, he's responsible he's a transport cabinet holder, so I would pedestrians are transport, aren't they? So
I'd ask him about that and to see if they're going to mend it.
Yeah,
get this forward into the sea.
He might try and body swerve that one, but we can always ask him, no problem at all.
Because it's a big loss of amenity that you can't walk to St Lawrence along the coast.
Yeah. Okay.
But you need to get in touch with Natural England. They're dealing with that right now in the way that they do. But no, it's difficult because we can't have anyone there. We've had the helicopter out here 3 times this week with people tumbling off the cliff. Let's not do any more. That's far too much money.
I take it the meeting is finished, so I'm not taking notes, Chair, just so you know.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. We don't have any other business, thank God. So anyway, thank you